Hello, and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. Is there an agreement between the United States and Iran on the horizon? Or will the region plunge deeper into war that could spark a global energy shortage and a world economic crisis? The answer to that question seems to be shifting every day, every hour, even every minute as the U.S. Israel-Iran war enters its fourth week. Over the weekend, threats and ultimatums were being exchanged between U.S. President Donald Trump and the Iranian regime. They came fast and furious.
Iran threatening retaliation if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to attack its electricity grid. Trump gave Iran an ultimatum late Saturday, saying the U.S. would strike Iran's power plants unless Tehran fully reopened the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours. In response, Iran's parliament speaker said critical infrastructure and energy facilities in the Middle East could be destroyed should Iranian power plants be attacked. The Islamic Republic also vowing to shut down the Strait of Hormuz indefinitely in response to Trump's demand.
And then, suddenly, Trump backed away from his ultimatum Monday, saying he was delaying his threat to destroy Iranian energy infrastructure for 5 days, citing what he called productive talks with the Iranian regime. Officially, Iran says no such thing is happening. The country's parliamentary speaker said that, quote, no negotiations have been held with the U.S. and calling reports of such talks fake news being used to manipulate the financial and oil markets. Talks or no talks, there has been no let-up on the intense exchanges of missile fire in Iran, across the Gulf, in Iraq, and in Israel. The death toll across the region has now climbed well into the thousands. Joining me on the podcast today for an overview on the ever-shifting and confusing situation is Sima Shine. Sima is a former career Israeli intelligence officer. She spent most of her career in the Mossad and afterwards served on the country's National Security Council and in the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Sima is now a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies. Our conversation is coming up.
I'm Esther Solomon, Editor-in-Chief of Haaretz English. Around the world, the fight is on to preserve critical and independent media. Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, upholds its long tradition of accurate, committed, and incisive journalism, refusing to bend its reporting to pressure from any government or leader. A digital subscription to Haaretz gives you up-to-the-minute news and analysis in English from journalists who live Israel's reality and are committed to covering the Middle East and its global repercussions.
Sima Shine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sima, an all-out conflict with Iran is something that I would imagine the Israeli military intelligence community must have been preparing for and playing out various scenarios for decades. So, given your history and experience, are you watching things play out in a way that you would have anticipated?
It's a difficult question because you can understand that the circumstances are very different. The fact that the U.S. is together with Israel actually started the war. It's completely different circumstances than what I could imagine in the past. And of course, the issue of how things will develop is, as you can see also with the debates that are already going between different organizations. I always said two things which I think are even correct now. One is that Iran is a system, is not a personality. And therefore, even by eliminating Khamenei and some other important people, and then Larijani, which was a very important person for this war, the system doesn't change dramatically. Of course, these people had their influence. They were coordinating between the different, the military and the political and the different echelons. But at the end of the day, it is a system that was prepared for a war, learned the lessons from the previous war in June 25, and organized itself in a way that will enable it to operate even if people are eliminated. So from that respect, it's not a surprise for me. I said it before, I knew it is a system that prepared itself. On the other hand, the effect of the strikes and the destruction that is already taking place in the missile program, the nuclear program, of course, basis of the IRGC and the control and command systems and the maritime and all the ships that were already struck. So from that point of view, I'm a little bit surprised because it looks that that Iran doesn't have any capability of defending itself. It is less surprise after June 25 because we saw it also in the war between Israel and Iran, but it is now even more.
In Israel, there is huge public support for this war. Really, the polls are showing almost a consensus with approval of the war in 90% range. And that's despite the heavy price the home front is paying. We're all sleep deprived here. I don't know if you are, Sima. The narrative of our government is that this was an opportunity that could not be missed. With the Iranian military weakened, the axis of resistance collapsed in the previous war, its economy in shambles, the public demonstrations in the streets, and since June, its air defense systems gone. It might have been the decision by Trump that made it happen after the regime would not respond to his offer of negotiations, but this is something that the Israeli establishment believes should have happened and has the potential of making Israel, the region, and the world safe from the Iranian threat. At least that's what we're hearing from Prime Minister Netanyahu and across the board from our top political echelon. I'm wondering, do you agree with that?
I agree partially. I agree that from the point of view of an opportunity, no question there was an opportunity. The first and foremost and the most important, I think, is the willingness of President Trump to go for all over the, not just a strike as it did in June on one place, but for a full-scale war. Completely coordinated with Israel on all the levels, which is, I can understand the opportunity from the Prime Minister's point of view. He was talking about Iran most of his life, and that was an opportunity. Of course, it was even easier because we saw the war in June, that Israel conducted most of the days on its own. The accumulation of the war in June and the fact, as you mentioned, the proxies that are less strong, even though we see Hezbollah in the north, I agree with that. That was an opportunity. Now the question is whether this opportunity will pay itself. What will be the day after? And I think that if the regime stays in power, and there are good chances that it will, that means that this regime will be on one hand, much weaker, economically, militarily, socially, everything. But on the other hand, will have high emotional revenge feelings vis-a-vis Israel, because the U.S., they cannot handle the U.S., so they will focus on Israel. And of course, which is much, much worrisome than anything else, is that they understanding in Iran that will be coming out as a result of the war, that only a nuclear capability will deter in the future any such attack. And therefore, I think they will do everything they understand they can do in order to get to a nuclear bomb. I don't think that they before didn't want a nuclear bomb, but before there were a lot of restraints, part of them because of Khamenei, and part of them because they understood that somebody will attack them. And now that is, I think, across the board in Iran, that only nuclear capability will prevent a second or third attack.
So it sounds like you think there might be a boomerang effect. Instead of preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power in this war, we might be motivating them more to improve their nuclear capabilities if they're able to?
Yeah, I think from the point of view of motivation, no question that there will be higher motivation to get to a nuclear bomb. The question, of course, will be capabilities, and therefore the issue of the enriched material to 60% became so important in the eyes of everyone. And the question will be whether at the end of the war we'll find that Iran, I don't know how, but that the material is not in the hands of Iran. This option will be able only in two directions. One that I don't think we'll go for, and that's a military attack on the sites and taking out, it's not one site, it probably is two or three. and taking out the material, I think it's a very, very complicated military operation, and I doubt if it will happen. And therefore, the other option to get out of the material is only by an agreement. Agreement is not something impossible, but the Iranians, I doubt whether the Iranians will be willing to go, if there will be negotiations, if they will be willing to go for things that they didn't accept before the war. They say that they have the right to enrich. In the dialogue in Geneva before the war, they said that they are willing to dilute the 60% under inspection, but they didn't want to give up in any way the right to enrich. And this was actually the turning point between them and the Americans that demanded zero enrichment. So difficult to see Iran after the war accepting such a demand. And if that will not be in an agreement, I don't see how this material will be taken out of Iran.
Sima, we're talking about after the war, but we're very much in the middle of the war. Things are coming down, as they usually do these days, to what will Donald Trump do. It feels to me as if he's been taken by surprise regarding what's happening with the Straits of Hormuz and the ramping up of the threats. As we record, the latest threat from Iran is that it will strike electrical plants across the Middle East if Trump follows through on his threat to bomb power stations in Iran. Obviously, the threat to bomb power stations in Iran comes if the Straits of Hormuz are completely blocked. Iran has threatened now to mine the entire Persian Gulf if it is invaded in any way. Did Trump miscalculate, and has he backed himself into a corner?
From the point of view of the result, where we stand now, it looks that he was not prepared to. I know that the issue, there was no secret about Iran saying before the war what they will be doing if they are attacked. They said everything, and they are fulfilling everything they said. One of them was the closure of Hormuz. I am sure that the militaries on both sides, in Israel and in the U.S. CENTCOM, have been thinking about that, and have been thinking about the possibility, what are the possibilities to open or to put pressure on Iran to open. Whether the president himself allocated enough weight to this possibility, I doubt, because if he would think about that, or the people around him, not the military people, but the others, they would have to do something from the beginning of the war to make sure that Iran cannot do it. Not that it is easy, but nothing has been done before Iran announced the closure of the Hormuz. Now, the Iranians are saying the Hormuz Straits are not closed. They are only closed for those who attack them. And actually, we saw Chinese and the Indian, and I think also Japanese vessels were crossing the straits. Now, what happened is that the president, once he faced this trouble, he decided, one, to remove sanctions on Russia for a while, which is a huge present for Russia, and two, to allow the Iranians to sell the oil that is already out of the Hormuz, which is a lot of oil is in different containers, the ships. In order to make the oil market more balanced, he allowed also Iran to do it. So for the time being, we see a closure of the Hormuz, or partial closure, and at the same time, we see Iran exporting oil and getting revenues. So it is a very strange situation. Now, to the other part of what Iran has said, what will happen if the ultimatum of Trump is materialized, I think we have to take into account that everything they are saying they will do, because this is the only tool they have in their hands. And therefore, there is a huge question, why are they attacking the Gulf states? Not only American bases in the Gulf states as they started, but of course also oil and gas facilities and the hotels and the airports, because this is the only tool they have in their hands. Two different channels. One is that they will put pressure on President Trump to stop, and the other is that by taking out their oil and gas from the oil market in the world, that will put the other side of the pressure on the international community as well as on President Trump. We already see that Qatar, for instance, has announced that 17% of its gas export was harmed, and it will take between 3 to 5 years to recover from that. So we already start seeing the beginning of shortage of gas that might be in the near future.
And have the Gulf states reacted as the Iranians may have anticipated by pressuring Trump to stand down? Or are they becoming more, I hate to say it, Israeli in their thinking and thinking that this short-term pain that they're feeling might be worth it because Iran is clearly such a long-term and major threat to them that they feel like this war should play itself out and weaken Iran as much as possible, if not affect regime change totally?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, before the war, we know that all the Gulf states have put pressure, and Turkey, have put pressure on the president not to start a war. They understood much better than Trump, I think, that they will pay the price. And they understood that instability in the region doesn't play into their hands, and they had their own question marks as to whether it's possible to topple the regime. Now, after the war, I think it might be that we see some differences within the Gulf states. Probably Saudi Arabia and the Emirates think that the more the war will continue, the weaker Iran will get out of this war, and it will be easier for them to handle the problem of Iran. I think that Oman and Kuwait and Qatar, I don't know where exactly they stand, but Oman and Kuwait, no question that they prefer the war to stop. They don't want to be more harmed, and they think that it doesn't support any of their interests. So it's a mixed, it was never that all the GCC were thinking the same and having the same interests, and I think on this occasion it's the same. Part of them are willing to see more and more weaker in Iran at the end of the war, especially since everyone estimates that a regime change will not happen immediately during the war. It might happen after some time, but because of the problems that Iran will face after the war, but we don't know yet how the war will finish and when, so it's a speculation that is not yet to be done.
Sima, I know you're no longer privy to all of the information that Israeli intelligence possesses, but is there a way of assessing how much Iran really has weakened? Now it's almost over 3 weeks. We're in our 4th week of the war. Are there ways of assessing and figuring it out? And we know, as you said, that they were ready for this, so presumably they've decentralized. But does the fact that they're continuing to fire so much on so many targets across the region a sign that they really still are strong despite the toll that our attacks are taking?
I think Iran entered the war with a lot of problems, especially on the economic sphere. This was also one of the reasons for the uprising of the people in the streets. The economic situation was very, very difficult. Shortage of water and electricity, and the inflation, high inflation, and so unemployment, everything. I think this is only worsening. It will be more difficult, more problematic after the war, because Iran didn't have answers before the war and sure will not have any answer after the war. Even the situation will be more difficult. So that's on the economic one. From the military point of view, a lot was damaged in Iran. If it's to its navy, if it's, of course, the defense system, air force, they didn't have a lot of air force, but what they had, most of it was striked. There is no question they will be weaker from the parameter of if you are counting the military capabilities, economic capabilities, and others. But this regime is very stubborn, is very determined to stay and to preserve the system, the revolution, the Islamic revolution system in Iran. I think many people in Israel don't understand how much. First of all, it's the first time in history of Islam that there is such a state, a big one with resources, that is ruled by Shia. Shia is the smallest community in the Muslim world. The Sunnis are the majority. And from their point of view, this is an achievement that they have to preserve in any circumstances. And therefore, the willingness to preserve the system, of course, it's also a personal issue because they are identified with the system. They don't know what will be their future if the system collapses. But it is more than just personal reasons. It is ideological, a very profound ideological aspect of the fact that preserving the system is more important than keeping your life. And that is especially on the high echelons of the IRGC, of the Iranian political leadership. We see now Kalibaf, the head of the parliament, who was in the past the commander of the Air Force of the IRGC. So those people are committed to the system and to the preservation of the system for the future. So it's difficult for Westerners and for Israelis, I think, as well, to understand that why don't they go for an agreement with Trump, give up the nuclear agreement, the nuclear capabilities, and have a removal of sanctions, and they think in a different way. It's not that, as many people ask me, they are not logical. No, they are logical, but their logic is a different logic, and one has to understand it.
So it's all or nothing for them. If they keep their regime in place, it's a victory no matter how deteriorated, battered, destroyed their country is. As long as they're still standing, they've won.
Exactly. And that is what they are doing now. They are trying to put such a high price on the other side that the war will finish. They say that they have a long time, they can stay for long. I don't think that's the situation. They want to stop the war, but they want to stop the war when they are in power and they can put demands. And we see already demands that they are saying they will stop the war only if they get compensation for the damage, if they get guarantees that they will not be attacked. There are 6 different demands that they have put in order to go for a ceasefire, an agreement, but I think they want a ceasefire, but the question is the price.
So was it a flawed strategy, all of these targeted assassinations of their top leadership? Are we now getting down to levels of leadership that are even more hardline and even more dug in and even more invested in the system and less likely to compromise on anything than the people that we've assassinated?
I will not say it because I don't think that there are those who think that Larijani could be more moderate because he supported at that time in 2015, he supported Rouhani with the JCPOA. Most of the people that got to the high levels of the National Security Council, Parliament, or President is different, this kind of president, but he is not important in any way. He was not important before, he is less today. And of course the IRGC, they have put the pressure to elect the son of Khamenei. So without them, I don't think he would be elected. There are different rumors, which I don't know if are correct, that he was not the first choice of his father, but that's not important. I think what is important is that the IRGC is much stronger today than it was before. First of all, because it's a war, and they are conducting the war. And secondly, because they have most of their people are radicals, the commanders of the system, and it's a combination of personalities and also of the developments. Iran has been attacked, and so much damage has been it has suffered, and everything that people became more radical because they want, at the end of the day, to keep the system. And to keep themselves, but first and foremost, the system. So one would think that in keeping the system would be better to go for an agreement and to compromise on different things, but elements. They don't think like that. They think that if they stay and demand what they are demanding, and they will get, even if they will not get everything, of course, nobody will compensate them. The most important demand, I think, at the end of the day of the war, will be the demand to get guarantees that they will not be attacked again. This is the most important for Iran, even if the rehabilitation and reconstruction and everything will take more time. This is the most important one, and we'll see how it's going to be ended.
As you said, Sima, we can't close this interview without discussing Lebanon and Hezbollah. After all, they're right on Israel's border. Defense Minister Israel Katz has threatened to flatten the border villages on Israel's northern border, Gaza-style flatten. He used the word flatten. And as we record, we have ground forces heading to the Litani. There's been an announcement to evacuate everything south of the Litani River. Do you see a full-on Lebanon invasion in the works, a third Lebanon war?
I think Lebanon is a huge tragedy for Lebanon, also for Israel, but first and foremost for Lebanon. We know that the leadership in Lebanon, the president and the prime minister, wanted to get to any kind of a dialogue with Israel. They know they don't have any problems, territorial problems between Lebanon and Israel, or let's say if there is something, it's very minor. And they understand that Hezbollah is operating for Iran and not for Lebanon. So about that, there is no question, and I think there are more and more people in Lebanon that also understand that Hezbollah has taken Lebanon in order to support the Iranian cause. But at the same time, and that is what was said before the war, the IDF has been saying that Hezbollah was reconstructing its capabilities, military capabilities, in a speedier way than the Israeli attacks that were along the last year. And I think this is correct. We see now how many missiles and rockets and everything they have. And we know that a lot of IRGC people have come after the war to Lebanon in order to support Hezbollah, because after the elimination of Nasrallah and the all commanders of Hezbollah, they were in a very poor situation. So Iran has sent IRGC officers to support them, to reorganize them. I'm sure part of them are still now in Lebanon. Some have left Lebanon because the government has demanded that, but and were evacuated by Russian airplanes. I think it's even a kind of a surprise to Israel. They have much more capabilities than we thought before. The only option they have is to fight, and to try by fighting and by when they will find themselves the day after to be in a situation where they can preserve their political and military position in Lebanon. And as to your other question, I heard the defense minister, and I know that the army is trying to have a kind of a buffer zone that will keep the people on the Israeli side of the border safer from any invasion into Israel. And it's going to be probably, again, we had it, if you remember, many years ago, a buffer zone, and Israel in 2000 decided to leave it. That's not always a good solution, but in the current situation, especially with the people on the border that are again in a war, I think this, for the time being, it is the only solution to make them feel safer, not from rockets and missiles, but from invasion. Radwan and the special forces of Hezbollah invading into the kibbutzim and cities. So we are going in this direction. And one last sentence is that both Hezbollah and Iran have been saying that once the war will finish in Iran, it will also be finished with Hezbollah, and the agreement that will be, or something that will be at the end of the war, will include all fronts. I'm not sure that is the position of Israel, but that is the position of Iran and Hezbollah.
Well, peace on all fronts sounds good to me. Sima Shine, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and your analysis. And as I say with all of our guests these days, stay safe.
Thank you. And you too.
And that wraps things up for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Sima Shine, and to producer Eli Shimoni and editor Adi Shacham. If you'd like to keep listening to our podcast, make sure you never miss an episode. Please subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're so inclined, leave us a comment and a 5-star rating, and that way more people can find us. And to keep up with all of the war updates, as well as the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.